Live stream. Okay, we are live. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay, good. All right, good morning, everybody. It is Deanna with toolsofelnergyprotection.com. And today I am so super excited to have Michele Thebodo, sorry.
Totally fine.
Trying to pronounce your beautiful name. And today we're going to talk about the mind-body connection and why that's so important. So if you are an empath or a highly sensitive person and you've had some trauma in your life, then you're having maybe challenges going forward with the mind and the body and knowing what's happening. So what we're going to do is talk a little bit about those. If you have some questions, go ahead and put them down below here in Facebook. And we'll be taking questions, and I'd received some questions yesterday that I'll also be covering. And we're going to talk a little bit about what happens when you receive trauma in your life, how that affects the body. And as you're aging, how does that affect you as you're going through the transitions in your life? So as we get older, we have more wisdom, but we also begin to work on ourselves and realize that maybe we're not going forward because of certain things that have happened to us in the past. So I'll let Michele introduce herself and tell us a little bit about you and your work.
Hi, my name is Michele, and it's Thebodo. Don't worry about the pronunciation. Michele also has one L, which is not as common. I live in Massachusetts. I'm a mom of 3 boys. I've also I have my fur babies, 2 boxers, been married almost 20 years to my loving husband. I'm a personal trainer, group fitness instructor, and I believe it or not, wasn't always somebody who loved to exercise. I did it because I felt like, well, I ate this amount of calories or this extra Snickers bar, so I have to burn the calories to work it off. And part of what we're talking about today is making that mind-body connection. And part of my story is that once I got to, be more consistent with exercise, I realized all these extra things it was helping me with. It no longer became about the calories I needed to burn. It was how I was feeling afterwards because of those lovely things called endorphins. I always had this glow and just walking tall and confident feeling after getting a workout in. And I learned to focus on that more than about the calories. And again, with the compound effect of exercise, it began to help with my anxiety, something I've struggled with for a long, long time, as I'm sure most people out there have some sort of anxiety and depression with the way our society is. But I found that exercise and moving my body was just one of the small details of how to combat those symptoms that I was having. Again, childhood trauma can also contribute to whether it's, your depression, your anxiety. And for me, again, making that mind-body connection as somebody who had struggled with an eating disorder from early childhood, bringing forth listening to podcasts. And it was a podcast that actually gave me this information that the eating disorder was connected with the childhood trauma. And going forth with that information led me to getting therapy and working on, again, connecting with my body, feeling my feelings instead of suppressing them with, alcohol or food, for instance. So as somebody who, growing through the trauma, working on herself, it led me to want to help others do the same thing. So, I don't know if you've ever heard the expression, we don't climb this mountain to get to the top. We climb this mountain so that we can help somebody else climb the same mountain.
Oh,
so that's kind of been my philosophy. I've taken what I've learned to help other women, especially women, to, learn how to love the body that they have, feel fit, not focus on what society tells us about you're only fit if you're a certain size, and just learning to appreciate our bodies. And now I'm going through, premenopause, menopause, dealing with all those things and how this all works in with that. And we can get into more detail on how that's going to help you make that mind body connection also.
Right. Wow, that's a lot. I hope everybody listening, either now or in the future, can really relate to that. It's such an important story. And one of the things I'm finding, Michele, is that because I do the metaphysical work, which deals, with the time, the space, and the shifting of the planets, that we as people on this planet are being expected to up level our game in order to make it through these shifts that are happening on the planet. So anybody that looks at the news and sees the different things that are happening in our environment and just the political scene at large, it takes a lot more energy and focus to be able to work through these things. And if you don't have your body, which is the generator in the 3D world, then you're going to have a tougher time of it. And that was one of the reasons that I was so excited for you to come on and we could talk about this and share what's happening for us and how that's looking, because there's a high level, as you put it, of anxiety right now, and a lot of mental health issues being discussed across the board. And sometimes people don't understand that the physical and the emotional are one, because like you said, with the eating disorders, we try to stuff our emotions down or push them to the side. And in my upbringing, it was a very patriarchal society where men were very logical. And if you wanted to move forward in your life or business, you had to be logical and ignore your emotions, which of course, stores in the body.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's again, The Body Says No is a really great book by Gaber. I wrote it down, Gaber Mate. When the Body Says No speaks to that as well. We do suppress all of those things in our body. It's going to come out one way or another, whether it's anxiety, skin issues. For me, it's dealing with premenopause. It's high cortisol, high estrogen, and finding ways to combat that with exercise like yoga and meditation. And then what we put into our body as well is fuel for the mind and body as well.
Right. There was a lady that I used to know that was talking about how your gut health was everything. And she would talk to us about how the fuel, came from your gut for the rest of your body. And so if your digestion wasn't good and you weren't putting good things in, that would slow you down, so to speak, or not give you the results that you desired. And so at that time, I started paying more attention to what I was putting in my mouth. And then COVID came along and we were all on lockdown and you were talking about the cortisol. And so running a business as, a womenpreneurs, there's a lot of background work that goes in, and that can cause a lot of stress, trying to meet deadlines, commitments, details, and then our personal lives and our kids and our families. And so I began to grow a Buddha belly, is what I called it for a while, because of all that stress and not putting the right thing in. And then, that went on for a couple of years, and I attempted or tried to exercise like what you were talking about. Being a spiritual mentor, though, I had more of a connection to the divine. So I would strengthen that and ignore my physical body, just put in it whatever I had to keep it going, which is not balanced. And I think now a lot of people have been through that as well for whatever reason. So when we started to come out of COVID and I was going back to the gym, I began to notice that when I would work out, I would cry. And I'm thinking to myself, looking at the people in the gym going, I hope they don't think I'm weird. No, just lots of tears. So at that time, I was working through what I call recovery from a narcissistic parent. And so a lot of the highly sensitive, empathic type people have had abusive parents. Generally, narcissism goes hand in hand with empathy or being empathic and highly sensitive. And so what I didn't realize was that when I was working out and I was doing weight resistance, that triggered emotions that were caught up in my physical body. And that's why I was crying, which also disturbed me. So Can you speak to that about how you're working out? You might find a release point that helped you.
Yeah, it's actually very common, especially for somebody that is a coach, personal trainer, group fitnesses. I've witnessed and myself had episodes where I was brought to tears, or even had an instance where I had heart palpitations during a workout because I was getting my cortisol to come down, but my body didn't know the difference between the stress that I was normally dealing with, like from a narcissistic parent or just whatever it is going on in your life, to my heart rate was going up in this workout. So again, usually when this happens, it's very normal, it's very common. For me with yoga, a lot of times when you're in the end of that yoga practice and you're laying in savasana and you're just, all of the feelings come rushing in, you just start crying. It's very normal. I've had it happen during acupuncture because, again, if we're suppressing all those emotions and your body doesn't know the difference between you're excited, you're exercising, or you're stressed, it's going to have those similar reactions. And I often will have a little mantra that I say to myself, you are safe, you are loved, and you are meant to be here. And I just repeat that to myself. And when I have somebody in one of my classes going through the same thing, I tell them, you're meant to be here. You're in the right place. You're surrounded by good people. And that's what's important, is to surround yourself with good people and ask for help when you need it. So as somebody who, like you said, was told at a young age to don't cry, don't be a baby, you've stuck with that your entire life. So now it's going to be a lot harder for you to feel your feelings. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be hard, but it's okay. And let it go. There's people say it's inappropriate to cry in public, but that's just something society has told you. I think we need to do a lot more showing our emotions and not hiding them. And again, so that we don't feel like we're alone, because guaranteed somebody else in that room is feeling the same thing or something similar.
Yeah, that is true. I've been discovering that in my own work as I'm bringing forward more and more trainings. I'm finding more people stepping forward going, I absolutely feel that way. So that's a really good thing, what you were saying about we climb the mountain so we can help others. That's beautiful.
We need to talk about this stuff more. It needs to
Yeah.
be spoken and talked about more.
Well, I looked at the history because I wondered why. So I study a lot of empaths stuff because I am empathic. And I'd like to talk just real quickly about the spectrum so people understand that. My teaching, or my guides were telling me, because I kept asking them, why is it if I was born empathic with this beautiful gift that I was born to a narcissist? Who would ever want that? Who would pick that? And what I learned is there's a spectrum. So on one end of the spectrum, you have a highly sensitive person. Then you come over a little bit, you have an empath. Then you come over a little bit and you have a sociopath, then the narcissist, and then the psychopath. And what I learned is the psychopath is the only one that's chemically born that way. Their brain is born that way, but the rest of them are developed. So in the short of it, my narcissistic parent is a highly sensitive person, probably an empath. And they suffered so much trauma that they began to build up walls, emotional walls. And that's what converted, if you will, to the narcissistic personality. The reason that's important is I began to look at history and I'm like, why now? Why are we all of a sudden coming out with, we need to talk more about these emotions and it's okay to tell? And if you look back at American history, there was a point in time when, we had immigrants coming over to the countries and they were trying to make it, and they had to stick in tight, close circles, and you could only trust, certain groups. And then you had the Depression came along, and people were like, no emotions, no fear. You walk forward, you do what you got to do. I mean, do you remember hearing that maybe from your grandparents or your great grandparents?
Yes.
There's no room. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so historically, I just thought that was quite fascinating how it's come to that point. And so now we're beginning to talk about emotions more, which is great. And I think both of the mountains that we've climbed, today I really was wanting to bring out for people that are watching how important it is that as you're working with your body, you recognize the emotions, which is what you just touched on. And I wrote down here two things. And one was, you said you tell your clients you're meant to be here. That is so beautiful. I almost teared up when you said that. Because on my journey of doing this as a business and teaching people how to be more spiritual and to incorporate that in navigating their 3D world, I had a lot of challenges going forward because I kept feeling like I wasn't good enough to do this job. I wasn't good enough to have a YouTube channel or to spread this. But yet people kept telling me how much they enjoyed working with me. So I did a meditation one day and I asked within inside of myself, what was the number one reason I was stuck in being able to share information with people? And the answer came back, I don't deserve to be alive.
Mm.
And that came for early in childhood because of the way that I came into this world. I was unexpected. And so that sentiment was something that was planted early on. And so I've had to go back. Well, I don't have to, but I've chosen to go back and repeat that mantra. So for other people that are having trouble, maybe their parents rejected them or the siblings rejected them, I think that's important to really look at. You deserve to be here. God's spirit source has a reason for you to be here.
Absolutely.
And it may be to just shine the light to the person next door, or when I go grocery shopping, I always smile and call the clerk by their name, because a lot of people don't do that these days.
Yeah, it's
All
those
right.
little things that count for sure.
Absolutely. Then the other thing I'd like for you to speak to is trust, because you said trust. So there's two kinds of trust going on for me. One is trusting myself to make the right decisions, and the other is trusting community. And I've noticed among other empaths, sometimes when I have a group, it's hard for them to bond and trust other people because of what they've been through.
Yeah, I think obviously the trust, you have to start with yourself. And I think you touched on a little bit, you have to kind of go into your inner child and cater to that inner child that, for you felt like she wasn't meant to be here, like she didn't deserve to be here. And once you start working on giving that inner child the love that you didn't get from your parents, and treat yourself that way, it will allow you to open up the trust. And as far as other people, I believe that, I always try to see the good in everybody, but sometimes there isn't always the good in everybody, and you do get hurt. And I think that's okay. But again, that comes down to boundaries. And I think it takes time. The big thing is time, especially when you're dealing with trauma that goes so deep into our childhood. And now for me, it's been with me for 49 years. So it's going to take that. It's not going to happen overnight. The trust isn't going to come overnight. It's going to take time.
Absolutely. The B for boundaries.
Yes, absolutely. A big capital B for boundaries, for sure.
So one of the things I learned, I did go to therapy for a while to help me with working through these things, because for a while I just thought I was nuts. And some people in the family dynamic suggested I was making things up. And it's like, yeah, no. But one thing I learned with boundaries when you're first setting them is setting them with yourself. So that gets back to the diet and the routine of exercise. And it's so important. I struggle still with getting to the gym. So I made myself a promise to go at least 3 days a week, could probably go more. And I noticed that my brain will allow me to do this for about 2 to 3 weeks, going 3 days a week, the same time every day. And then at about that 3-week mark, I just quit going. No reason, nothing in particular, just quit. Have you found a way to work past that?
It's very common. You may or may not have heard the phrase, it takes 21 days to change a habit. But I honestly think you need to double that. So it takes those 3 weeks to create your habit, and then another 3 weeks to make it stick. And honestly, I think the best way is to not do it alone, is to have a coach, have a workout buddy, somebody that you can reach out to. It's the same thing if you're looking at your schedule Monday through Sunday. Maybe you set your goal to go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, You go Monday because it's the start of a new week. Everyone does Monday. You maybe go Wednesday, but then something happens between Wednesday and Friday and you fall off. If you have somebody to connect with, whether it's a gym buddy, a coach, a trainer, it's somebody that you can reach out to so you're not doing it alone. That's going to give you that support, that positive support.
And somebody that actually goes.
Yes.
That workout buddy, so that both of you don't end up at the local coffee shop going, well, maybe next week.
Yep, exactly. And then again, just focusing on how, keeping a journal, how you felt about your workout, how you felt when you were done, and getting that positive reinforcement from either outside resources or again, listening to your body and how you felt when it was done.
I think that's so important, the journal. I've been noticing too, when I keep a journal on, when we're talking about the mind-body connection,
Mm-hmm.
and I add that spiritual aspect in my practice. And one of the most, now looking back, very comical, but at the time I didn't understand, because I wasn't able to trust one of my parents. The other parent was good, just wasn't able to trust one of them completely. And you don't understand that as a child and all that. That person had me to where I didn't want to trust my guardian angels or spirit guides. So when they first began working with me, I would hear things in my head, my own voice in my own head, wasn't scary, to, maybe get up and, go do this or go do that. And in the process of doing it, you would come across somebody you haven't seen in a while, or, maybe I needed, groceries and I only had half the money I needed. And I hear, go to the store today, and I go, and then everything I need is on sale, that kind of thing. And it was really a trust issue early on with listening to the spirit guides. So just very quickly, for those of you that have that aspect, you have the spirit, the connection, the mind connection, the body connection. When you're working with God, spirit source, or spirit guides, they will often give you information, and it's very, very quiet. It's not loud. It's not conscious thinking. It's not your ego, but it's very, very quiet. And so I will often get a nudge in the morning when I don't want to get up and I don't want to go to the gym, and I will often hear them tell me to go. And because I've learned to trust them, it makes it a little easier. So it's almost like a spiritual coach.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with that. I think too, you had said before about your gut. You had talked about your gut health, and I feel like 100% like your gut and your nervous system are connected. And if your gut is off, whether it's due to your nutrition or stress or both, it's going to not allow you to listen to those things, including your body or the spirits as well. Maybe it'll be a little louder if your nervous system is in a better place as well.
Yes, it's louder. It's also easier. I'm finding as I go along. I'm not resisting it so much.
Yeah. And it's, again, the muscle between our ears is a difficult one because it can play tricks on us. It can listen to what society has said versus, what we know to be true. And we have to keep working that muscle. And every time we do something that's a little scary, or that we don't want to do, it's making those choices, right? Like it's hard to sit on the couch, be depressed, have anxiety, but it's also hard to get that workout in. But which choice is going to propel you forward? They're both hard. They're both hard, but which one's going to move you towards your goal that you set for yourself? It's moving
I like
your
that
body.
way of thinking. They're both challenging to do.
Absolutely.
But the one will move you more forward than the other. That's awesome. The biggest challenge I have is getting to the gym when, we had a big snow. I got to go dig my car out.
Yep. That's when, a home workout might be a good idea. Getting something like that, which again, a personal trainer or someone like me can help you with. If you have a routine, sometimes you don't need any equipment. You have your body, so you can still move even though that snow is piled in your driveway.
Yes. And then also the snow's an additional workout.
This is true. Yes.
Seasonal. All right. I got some questions today that I'd like to cover.
Sure.
That people had written in, and funny, one of the gals wrote in, her name is Deanna 1009, and she writes, it's hard to set boundaries. I have to remind myself all the time to set them. How can I set boundaries at work?
That's a great question. I'm going to speculate that you're in, depending on what you're doing for a living, um, depending on what boundaries you're looking to set. Is it, maybe you have people coming to you with questions and you're trying to get your work done. You could send an email out in general and say, I'm available between this time and that time for your questions. Maybe have a couple of options, a morning time and afternoon time. And that's it. Like you have to, that's your boundaries. This is when you can come to me with questions, but that's it. So if that's
Yes.
what you're talking about, or is it the lunchroom gossip boundary that you want to set, which is very common. You go into the lunchroom and everybody vents, everybody does their thing. I can relate to this one when I was in corporate. The boundary I had to set was I didn't have lunch in the break room. I went to my car, I went on a walk. You sometimes have to remove yourself and create that boundary instead of being sucked in to the drama or the candy dish that you're trying to avoid. All the snacks people bring in the lunchroom.
Absolutely. I like the one about, setting the boundaries with different times at work. And when I was in corporate years ago, I would actually close the door to my office and I'd have a sign on it that says, if you have a challenge, come at this time or this time. Please, don't disturb. And I would find all the management would open the door and say, oh, well, it doesn't apply to me. And so I had to have a meeting with the management and say, look, I'm doing these things at these times that support you. And if I don't get them done, then you don't get what you need. And it is a bit of a struggle because they want to feel like they're exception to the rule. I find that quite a bit too. So having conversations is really good. And then it goes back to how you feel inside. If you feel like your parents violated your boundaries growing up, then you're more likely to allow other people at work to violate your boundaries.
Yes, I agree 100%.
So it goes back to working on self.
Yep, starts with you.
Exactly. And sometimes we don't want to own that, right? We're like, no, don't make me do it.
Yeah, because again, doing what you're used to doing is comfortable, and changing and saying no and setting boundaries is hard. And that's what we fight with. Like, is this this is difficult. Do we want to reach that goal? Yes. So then we have to do those difficult things.
Yes. And we used to call it picking up your bootstraps and moving it forward. Recently, my daughter, who's now a teenager, we're setting goals for both of us to do. And I have a whiteboard that we work off of. And, both of us have been in such, I would say, bad habits, but not the right thing, not getting up and going to the gym, not making sure we picked up after ourselves every night, just the things you can say, I'll do it in the morning. And so we made a whiteboard and we made a list of each day. And then I have AM things and PM things that we're to do. And I said, look, it's on a whiteboard. So we use different colors. Blue is something that really catches the attention, red also. And we use those colors to capture things that we wanted to do but weren't doing. And then I told her it's a fluid schedule. So one of the things, if you're struggling with making that discipline and saying, okay, I'm going to do this here, I'm going to do this now, and then you can't hold up to it, is to make a fluid schedule. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday are our gym mornings where we get up, we go to the gym. And so I wrote that in blue because it captures our attention. And then in red at the bottom, we've written things we want to do at night, like have family time together, do puzzles, read, other things than watching TV. But we did make it a fluid schedule. So she likes Legos. So we had a Lego night for a couple of weeks. And then she got tired of that and she wanted to change to doing puzzles. So because it's the same behavior of doing something like assembling something, Legos or puzzles, we left that space fluid so that it's not hard and fast and we can change it. The hard and fast is that in those evenings, we're not doing homework, we're not doing extra work from my business, we're taking time with each other. So I hope that really helps people that are having a hard time changing, because sometimes it's about carving out the space and then making the space fluid.
I agree. And also giving yourself grace. It's not about being perfect. I think a lot of us as empaths, we think it's all or nothing. So if you go to you don't go to the gym on Monday, then you're like, I'm just not going to go the rest of the week. Or I ate the cookie, so I'm going to eat the whole bag of cookies. It's just giving yourself that grace, like even with your to-do list. It's there. It's on a whiteboard. If you don't get to it, it's still okay. But giving yourself those options, which is great, not about perfection.
Yes, and it's also about balance, because if you give yourself too much grace, then you're right back in the same hole.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my goodness. All right. I want to switch to the next question that I really super liked. It's a very challenging one, and I think we've unpacked bits and pieces of it today. Becky writes, do you think empaths have a hard time setting boundaries because we don't want people to feel negative energy? And she says, from the people around us, it can be so overwhelming. So I think she's asking, how do you set a boundary? Because people might receive that boundary as a negative energy, or it also seems like she was asking that she doesn't want to be an overwhelm from drawing the boundaries because she's now considering the other person's feelings.
I think it's very common, especially with people who have had trauma at a young age and being an empath. If you grew up with a parent who you, like myself, where I had to always worry about her mood or his mood, with both parents with mood disorders. And growing up in that environment, always being sensitive and always worrying about, well, how do I lighten the mood, or how do I defend one parent against the other? And you grow up with that emotion, then you're trying to set boundaries as an adult and you don't want to upset the other person. And it's kind of, again, one of those things where you've got to set the boundaries. Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, but just like a muscle, the more you do it, the easier it is. It can be very conflicting with your inner child because you go back to those emotions from your inner child when you're setting those boundaries. And it's a journey that you're going to be on for the rest of your life. It's not like, oh, I've set a boundary, I'm good now. You're going to have to constantly work on those boundaries, not just with other people, but again, it starts with you and knowing how being around certain people make you feel and understanding why they're making you feel that way, and maybe understanding that maybe that's a boundary you need to set with those people. But again, at the end of the day, it's practice. Feel your feelings, understand why you wanted to set the boundary to protect yourself and your inner child, and that it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. You can say no, and it's perfectly healthy. It's probably one of the biggest things, in my opinion, that is the most difficult for people to do, especially as empaths and people who have the childhood trauma.
I liked what you said about boundaries with both parents. I'm wondering how many people we triggered with that one,
Mhm.
because you're not wanting to upset either parent, and being a young child and not having your frontal lobe fully developed, that's huge, because you might feel one way with one parent and one way with the other parent. And I know that my own daughter has expressed to me that she doesn't want to upset her father by establishing her own boundaries. And so we work on her establishing boundaries with me. And one of the most interesting boundaries I found with children when I was reading a book about that is that by not barging into their room, even if they have the door partially closed, but stopping at their door and asking if you can come in is a huge way to help your child to create their own boundary. Just kind of a side note, and then we weren't really talking about that, but I found a lot of those things in my own life, and I wasn't given that. So as I've been establishing boundaries, I've been unpacking myself of, okay, well, what boundary was violated with me? And a lot of times I didn't even know what a boundary was, because if you have one, people are going to beat the heck out of it. So in answer to part of Becky's question, and then what you were saying, is because I was not allowed boundaries growing up in a weird way, you just didn't know they existed. When I go to draw boundaries with other people, maybe other empaths, maybe other people that are damaged from childhood trauma, they will throw a fit or go into silence because that's what they learned from their parenting. Mm-hmm. So I've learned to recognize that when I draw a boundary with other people, a loving boundary, it's usually very easy. It's not hard. It's not like I'm pushing them really hard. It's just like, no, I'm not able to do that on that particular day, maybe there's another day. And they, begin to become angry, throw a fit, if you will, as an adult. I take a breath and I look at them and I think, okay, they've suffered similar traumas to me. So
Mhm.
A, that's probably why they're in my life. And B, I now have to set another boundary about how much I'm willing to listen to. And I find that's really big. And I think Becky may be talking about that, because when you have somebody who's pushing back in a tantrum mode instead of working things out, there's another boundary to establish, which is, I'm not able to talk to you much longer today. I've got to move on to the next person. Well, calm down, or not calm down. That's the word I don't like, triggery. When you get a chance to think about it, we'll contact each other again later or something, so that you're setting a time period. I'll talk to you next week at this time and date, work something out. I'm kind of floundering with that because there's so many things going through my mind. But, how would you suggest somebody set a boundary when they set a boundary and the other person throws a fit or goes into quiet mode?
I think it's typically, especially if you're dealing with setting a boundary with somebody that's narcissistic, maybe it's a parent or a coworker, and like you said, they have their own trauma as well. You kind of, again, you've got to protect yourself first, because again, as a child, you wanted to feel safe and you didn't feel safe. And you're setting a boundary to protect you, your inner child, and you're probably going to get, if they're narcissistic, some pushback, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong by protecting yourself and your boundaries. It's just, you just kind of have to let it go and roll with it. That's I probably not the answer that you want, but it is necessary for your health, for your mind, body, your soul, spiritually, whatever it is, to set those boundaries and let go of their reaction to it, as negative as that might be.
That's a great first step. Rolling with it. I like I like that. It's like, you set your boundary, you say what you need to say, and then you're done. And that's one of the hardest things I had to learn in this process, is to say what you need to say and then you're done.
Mhm.
Because otherwise the narcissist will pull you back into continuing arguing.
Right. And if you find you're coming away from it and you're still, again, go back to your body and where you're feeling that tension.
Mhm.
And sometimes there's breath work exercises you can do to help calm that trigger that you're feeling inside your body. For me, I usually feel it in my chest, in my stomach area, but there's definitely some breath work that you can do to help roll with it and
I
breathe
know my
with it.
stomach is that way. That was the first place I began talking to my inner child in my body, was that I realized my gut instinct had the heck beat out of it. So
Mhm.
if there's any empaths out there, highly sensitive people nodding their head about that, because you have a spidey sense, you have an innate ability, and you feel things and sense things and things, even at an early age, even if you're your childlike mind isn't ready to handle it, and you present that to the person that you're involved with, generally a parent, and they tell you absolutely not. No, 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 the sky isn't blue. It isn't blue. I don't care if you've observed it. I don't care if you think it is not blue. When your gut instinct has told you that. And that is, I consider that having my gut beat up, not physically, but emotionally. And after a while, you just don't trust your gut because you're second guessing yourself. So it
Mhm.
goes back to that gut health again.
Yes, definitely.
So
Can
sometimes
relate
when
to
I
that.
want to have the junk food, I'm wondering, is it my mind saying, hey, we want the sugar because we're going to get a high? Or is it my gut going, I need to soothe myself?
Honestly, it could be both. I can tell you from your brain, typically, especially if you're taking that beating mentally and you're exhausted, your brain will actually cause you to crave the sugar because it wants that spike in energy. So it's normal when you're tired, whether it's from lack of sleep or stress, and you're finding that you're having those sugar cravings. It's
Right.
just your brain is naturally saying, give me the sugar because I'm exhausted and I need to not be exhausted. But we all know that if we give in to some of those, it's not going to be good for our gut. It's not going to be good for our energy level in the future because we're going to crash. So it's, again, listening to your body, understanding why your body might be craving those things, and maybe give it a healthier option, some fruit instead of the other sugar, the not so good sugar. I don't like to call food good or bad, but sometimes you just need to eat the damn cookie, so eat it.
And have boundaries around it. Okay,
Yes.
take the one cookie out, close the bag, put it in the
Yes.
freezer.
Yes, especially because if you're in that heightened stress mode, you may not be able to listen to your body, and you've opened the bag of cookies and you're just like, if I eat these, I'm going to feel better. And then you typically don't. So it's, again, it takes time to take that step back, understand why you're feeling the need to create for those cravings, understanding chemically it's a normal thing that your body's going through, and then give that inner child what she needs,
Absolutely. So will you please tell us, let's say today I was like, ooh, I want to get started. I want to get Michelle's help. Can you tell us a little bit about how you'd get started with somebody new, and then give your Instagram channel and a way for them to reach out to you?
Sure. Typically, when I work with a client, we get a little bit of some history on them. We talk about things that they struggle with. I usually ask them for their top 3 to 5 goals. And I also ask them for at least 3 to 5 how they're going to feel when they reach those goals. So it always goes back to feeling. So we start with the physical, what those goals are, physically, mentally, and then how are you going to feel when you achieve them. And then I start with that journal. We journal. I'm not one that has you measuring food and tracking your macros unless that's something you want. I really go down to, because most people I deal with are struggling with some sort of whether it's an eating disorder or just they don't have a great relationship with food. So that's my forte. So I usually have them do a feelings journal instead. So we write down how you're feeling prior to eating, while you're eating, and after you're eating, with no guilt, no shame. Just, you don't even write down what you're eating. You're just talking about how you're feeling throughout the week. And it's just a great way to get people to connect with their body and how they're feeling. And then from there, we work on an exercise routine, depending on where they are in their stage of life. If they're dealing with issues with menopause or premenopause, I help with cycle syncing. That's where you work out based on your cycle. If you're dealing with things like high cortisol, high estrogen, sometimes I recommend a functional medicine doctor to help with certain testing that you might not get from your primary care to help understand where your hormones are if you're dealing with those kinds of issues. It's pretty much a individualized program. So it's a one-on-one program. I don't take a lot of clients. It's very individual because that's a boundary I set for myself as I limit my clients. So I can keep it more one-on-one, and we work together from anywhere from a week to however long it takes. You can reach me via email, which is, we can post it in the chat, but it's like Mary. And then my last name is Thebodo, Thebodo @gmail.com. You can also message me on Instagram. I'm at Live Well with Michele, and Michele is with 1 L. I do utilize different things like Voxer and WhatsApp and other apps to communicate. So if you're not on a certain platform like Facebook or Instagram, we can connect other ways as well. Did I miss anything, Deanna?
No, but I totally and completely recommend anybody watching go over to Instagram and tell your handle on Instagram again.
Live Well with Michele.
Yes, 1 L with a Michele. And I started watching her on Instagram, and sometimes that was the only inspiration I had to get up out of bed in the morning. And it's just wonderful to watch her work and go, and it's a really great page if you're needing some inspiration or you want to get to know Michele better before you decide that you might want to work with her. Okay, so a couple of things to wrap up. One, you were talking about journaling before you eat, while you're eating, and after you eat. And one of the biggest no-nos that I found myself doing is I eat while I'm watching TV. and therefore I'm not in touch with my brain and I'm not in touch with my body. And how would you recommend, if somebody's been used to doing that, to get away from that?
Again, it's a practice. You're working that muscle in between your ears. A lot of people are on their phones. I have a teenage son. It's a big thing when we sit around the table, which isn't as often as I'd like with our schedules, but the rule is no technology. Focus on what you're eating. Let's have some conversation. But if you're someone like yourself who works from home, you're sitting down to lunch, I have the same rule. No technology, just sit, enjoy your food, and start to practice chewing your food, smelling your food, looking at your food. That's part of what the journaling has you do. So again, it's hands, no technology, no TV. You're sitting with yourself in those moments and learning to feel and connect with your food in a different way.
I noticed that as I've been doing that, I'm cooking differently with different spices, because it's like now all of a sudden food has a flavor, whereas before it was just a way to, fill the tank.
Yes, exactly. And we do that, mindless eating all the time. People sit in front of the TV and watch a movie and have popcorn. I mean, that's what you do. You go to the movies and you stuff your face, right? That's what society tells us to do.
Go to the movies and stuff your face. That was funny, but pertinent.
But yes, but it's, again, we're trying to undo all of those things that society has taught us for however many years old you are. Those are habits that were created at an early age until now, and it's going to take time to undo those. So just practice.
Absolutely. And we were talking about setting boundaries. When I've made food choices, different choices, if I go to the movies and I don't do the traditional, popcorn and drink and stuff, and I've had people that will give me a rough time about it. And I will smile and tell them my boundary is to smile and tell them, well, you don't know what you're missing until you don't try it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big piece of it too. I don't know if we touched on that at all, but really quick, like any changes that you're making, especially when people start to notice you making those changes, they might be a little negative. Mm-hmm. And a lot of their negativity comes from their own insecurities. So just know that moving forward, it's a big thing when people start seeing you change and doing things that are positive and they're not quite ready, they may react in a negative way. And it's just coming from, it's not about you, it's about them.
Absolutely. That's what I was teasing though, since I'm not having the popcorn and they have not tried it, right? Anyway. The other thing is menopause. So one of the things that I found in my own process of working through childhood trauma, and it's not only childhood, but you take that and you go through to, like you said, whatever age you're at now. When I hit menopause, my physical body began to change. And of course, I had no control over it. And it began to show me that certain foods weren't good. And it also brought up a lot of emotion. So I don't know if there's any other women out there that when you go through menopause, all of a sudden your past trauma that you've suffered, whether you've stuffed it down or not, will come out in a way you didn't expect. And you think about things you've never thought about. And it's really almost like a trigger. I found it to be like a trigger of the physical body saying, hey, you need to work through these things now at this age so that you can have a good rest of your life. How have you been finding the transition?
Definitely. There's a huge, again, mind-body connection as we go through the change in our lives. It's really understanding women are very individual. No two of us are alike. We're not men. And a lot of what society and a lot of these apps that we're using are for men. They're not for women. It's just starting to come out. And that's, again, where cycle syncing and fueling your body based on where you are in your cycle or where you are in your life with premenopause, menopause, and having those tests done, those appropriate testings to determine, are you running high estrogen? Do you have the high cortisol? Are you, finding out where you are and where you need assistance, whether that's with supplements, food, I was somebody, for example, who was doing very high intensity workouts, sweating, burning like 600 to 800 calories in a workout. And I had to step back and go to more gentle stuff, especially depending on where I was in my cycle. And because you're in that fight or flight, you might be doing all the things, the working out, the eating right, and your body's not changing and you're getting frustrated. That could be why. And again, it's just coming back to your inner child, coming back to yourself, loving yourself where you are. And just, it's a part of life as we age. We're going through this together as women. So, and just to support each other and reach out for that support.
I think that's important that you notice that your body was different. That's what I heard you say. Your body was different, so you had to adjust the workout. So many times I find myself, up until now, pushing like a man would, I've got to get this done. I've got to meet this deadline. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And I didn't care what my body was going through. It's like, I'll drink more coffee or eat the cookie or whatever to keep it going. Mm-hmm. And then you come to a point of exhaustion. And when we're younger, I think we can do that. But as you get older and your body's changing, it's like, no, you have to work smarter, not harder.
Yes.
So thank you for that nugget, that golden nugget of information. For me anyway, that it's not only listening to my body, but finding out what its rhythms are, because I've been listening more and not beating myself up if I don't work 7 days a week, and having my forced day off, so to speak, and listening to that rhythm, because there's some days that are better than others. And if I don't listen to my body, then the days that are not better than others, I'm still pushing as if it was a better day. And, that's not good. So anyway, well, any last things that you'd like to share with our audience about connections? I know we covered so much ground in such a little time.
I know. Just quickly looking over my notes. I think I talked about, your support system. And I heard this years ago somewhere. You are the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And that doesn't necessarily mean people, humans. You can get that from books. It's in the TV you watch, the podcasts you listen to. It's all those things. So maybe as a checklist for you today is to think about that. Who are the 5 people you spend the most time with, whether that's people, books, podcasts, and think to yourself where you might be able to set those boundaries. Maybe pay attention to those people or those things and how they're making you feel. And if they're not making you feel good, it may be time to set those boundaries as one of your first steps. Or maybe add some of those other things in there that I mentioned, like podcasts, books, and other people that make you feel good and not make you feel bad.
I totally agree with that. Because I had a podcast I listened to for a while, but often I will do research when I'm working with a client that I haven't, worked with their particular issue. And I found myself listening to a podcast about relationships, and all of them were sour. And it was fascinating to listen to a couple of them, but then I started binge listening and I'm like, oh, now I feel bad. My body feels bad. I feel wrong, and I'm like, I can't listen to that anymore.
Yeah, it's important to listen to your body and know, especially with people, because if you're in those relationships, and I think as women we can relate, we've had a childhood friend maybe, or somebody, a coworker that we've been friends with for a long time, but you find yourself when they leave that you're just like, you have this very unsettled feeling. And as much as you feel like, you invested years into this relationship, but if it's not serving you, it's maybe time to slowly pull back. You don't have to cut ties quickly, because then it's too obvious and then it can be difficult, but it's just that slow step back of giving yourself those boundaries that you need. And, we can come and go with friendships sometimes, the ebb and flow, where we're connected. And then we go on different paths and maybe we come up again. But knowing in your body, if it's not serving you and you're spending that time with these people and you're leaving feeling so bad, there's your sign.
Exactly. I like to call those energy drainers or energy vampires. And then there's other times where, like you said, the friendship has served its purpose. Mm-hmm. And one thing I would like to add in the stepping back that I've done is to journal what that person had me feeling like, or why did I feel that, or what was I feeling? And what I do is I use, not in a bad way, that person as a convex mirror, the ones you put up when you're putting your eyeliner on or something to see up close. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not in a bad way, using them to see what's inside of me. Because if they're not a match for me, if our relationship isn't serving each other, but leaving me drained, then there's something inside of me that needs fixing. And then what I find is maybe I'm giving too much, or I'm allowing them to take too much, or maybe I'm giving them more than I should, which is within me. And as I journal that and realize it and work on myself, I'll actually find that the relationship just naturally pulls away and there's no effort to it.
Yes, especially if you're doing the communication, you're setting the boundary with that person and they flip out or they react very negatively. There's another sign. It's probably a good indication to pull away, because if they're not understanding and respecting your boundaries, then it's another indication that the relationship has reached its point.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I've had a great time today. If any of you are watching on Facebook later and you want to put a comment down below, that would be great. If you'd like to see us come back and do a different talk or a different topic, and let either one of us know. I know that Michele has Instagram, so you could message her there. And the email also is in the description. And I'm just super excited for the conversation and really would like to begin to help all of women and sensitives and empaths begin to focus on their bodies. And this time that we're in, it's very, very important that we keep our health.
Yes, let's love our bodies a lot more than we have been. Set that goal for yourself.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let us know if there's any other questions. You can put them down below. And if you'd like to see us come back at a different time and date, and we will see you soon. I had such a great time. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
Have a great
you.
day.
Bye-bye.